United Nations General Assembly is a complete success in the sense that most countries in the world have a unified narrative on what needs to be done in terms of peace, sovereignty, human rights, marine rights, climate change, deterrence of wars, dialogue, and such. United States and Israel seem alone in their quest for further suffering and war. The foreign minister of Venezuela has not wasted any time, and during this United Nations General Assembly, he has conducted meetings with leaders of South Africa, Oman, Togo, Ghana, Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, South Sudan, Mali, Burkina Faso, Rwanda, Zimbabwe, Belize, Serbia, Nicaragua, Kenya, Vietnam, Mozambique, Namibia, Dominica, Sri Lanka, Sudan, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Belarus, Cuba, Niger, Gambia, Qatar, Benin, Mongolia, Senegal, Iran, Chad, Angola, Bolivia, and the United Arab Emirates. And he hasn't even spoken yet to the General Assembly. China and Russia have not spoken either, so there is still more to come that will be discussed in a future video. Meanwhile, I've had the chance to hear lectures from the leaders of Kenya, Spain, Palau, Nauru, Micronesia, Bolivia, Dominica, Equatorial Guinea, Libya, Colombia, and Finland. For the most part, they support Palestine. For the most part, they support sovereignty. For the most part, they support peaceful dialogue. Of course, the leaders of Bolivia, Dominica, and Colombia were vocal on the request of removing United States ships currently harassing the Caribbean Sea, which has been determined again as a zone of peace, as a joint statement by ALBA countries, produced today in New York City. Meanwhile, United States wishes to remain in the spotlight, since they are no longer able to commit any friends or allies. They feel obliged to the resource of war and threat. And they partially reach their objective, as most people should be right now addressing important suggestions from the United Nations General Assembly, such as removing veto power to any Security Council member, as suggested by the President of Finland, or a permanent seat for an African country, as expressed by the leaders of Nigeria and Equatorial Guinea. Perhaps these General Assemblies should limit the speech time of leaders to 10 or 15 minutes rather than 25 minutes in order to use the remainder of time for summits where they should make agreements, because it seems that many of the leaders go, speak, and leave. But again, I am not in a position to suggest that either, because my own videos are also 20 to 30 minutes, which is the time leaders use for their speech. So maybe this time constraint cannot be avoided. It would be so wonderful if the planet took some time to learn about other countries and not necessarily the same little idiots, historically capable of throwing bombs all over the place, which dominate the news cycle. I honestly feel it's boring to speak again about the United States, especially after hearing so many opportunities from so many great countries in the planet. But unfortunately, the threat continues. The United States continues holding headquarters of the United Nations, which should be moved to another place so that the Palestine Authority can come in without being denied a visa. And also Donald Trump spoke for almost 1 hour, more than double than most other leaders. Definitely many things must change in the United Nations, but I no longer support the extremist position of just getting rid of the United Nations, because indeed it still exists and it encompasses the whole planet. Well, almost all the planet, because the president of Palau pointed out that the population of Taiwan, which is more than 20 million people, are not represented at the United Nations. Palau, by the way, has relations with Taiwan rather than with mainland China. Pete Hegseth summoned all hundreds of generals across the United States into the Pentagon in Virginia for a secret top meeting that many observers suggest is a prelude for formal World War III. Maybe this World War III would be a gigantic United States invasion simultaneously of Russia, Venezuela, Iran, and areas around Taiwan. Who knows? Anything can happen. And of course, Richard Grenell was again interviewed at some news network, insisting that he speaks on a regular basis with Nicolás Maduro and his government, suggesting that the carrot and stick approach to Venezuela continues as usual. Venezuela, by the way, suffered earthquakes yesterday in western Venezuela in the Andes, near Lake Maracaibo. And some people say these were fabricated earthquakes rather than usual tectonic plate shifts, as we all know in geology happen from time to time. I am more inclined to believe the standard tectonic plate shifts occurring yesterday, which caused earthquakes in Venezuela, which was felt in Colombia. But we cannot completely dismiss the fabrication theory of some sort of an atomic experiment against Venezuela. In light of public opinion, I am not sure how this pressure campaign of the United States will yield, because it seems that the United States is pressuring every single country in the world, and countries are increasingly fed up and just doing as we please. President Petro of Colombia suggested a penal lawsuit against the President of the United States because one of the speedboat shootings near Dominican Republic likely contained Colombian nationals rather than Venezuelans. And if they were killed, this is a crime of war entailing a penal lawsuit, which is a little complicated because we just hear that Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger left the International Criminal Court, and the United States is not a member of that court either, but still we must give international law a chance. Meanwhile, we hear some opposition both in Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana about the way ExxonMobil is exploiting or planning to exploit their oil resources as more and more of their population are realizing what Venezuelans realized many decades ago. Countries should own their petroleum facilities and engage in joint ventures with international companies for capital. But the majority stake decision should not be given up to a multinational. Another concern we have is in Ushuaia, southernmost Argentina, Tierra del Fuego Island, close to the Beagle Channel, which is the southernmost city in the world. Ushuaia, very well known for tourism, as it is somewhat close to Antarctica and the South Pole, now is threatened to host a United States military base because Javier Milei is giving up his country just for the sake of a United States Treasury Department loan. And by the way, loans are supposed to come from the International Monetary Fund, not from the private treasury of a central bank of one country. That seems as complete giving up of sovereignty, because now Argentina is formally becoming an asset of the United States as it becomes part of the balance sheets of the Department of Treasury. The flotilla continues crossing across the Mediterranean, and it was around Crete or Cyprus, so it should be approaching Israel and Gaza at any time. The Spanish and Italian warship in a companion are following, and the Turkish and Egyptian navies are also in the vicinity. Benjamin Netanyahu, as usual, says that the flotilla might not enter Gaza, and the flotilla captains are declaring that they will enter Gaza at any time. Perhaps this has a lot to do with the urgency of Pete Hegseth in summoning most generals of the United States into the Pentagon right now. Maybe they will just start total World War III right now, or at least that's what they want. However, I still believe there is a show narrative wishing to compete against the United Nations summit, which again, I believe it was a success. I really wish to congratulate Venezuelan Foreign Minister Ivan Gil for this extensive list of international diplomatic opportunities he has been producing on the sidelines of the meeting. And I also want to thank the presidents of most countries of the world. It seems that most countries are led by reasonable people who want peace, but unfortunately, some countries hold all the power, hold the veto, and have the financial resources to force reasonable countries just to surrender. I may recall the Dominica Prime Minister's speech. It was very gracious. She wants a woman Secretary General of the United Nations once Antonio Guterres' term expires, and she extensively argued for the union of Caribbean countries, including Cuba, Haiti, and Venezuela, which are enduring unrest in the case of Haiti and sanctions and blockade in the cases of Venezuela and Cuba. It is quite refreshing to see how vicinity of countries can make a difference. The countries of Oceania are also discussing the benefits or shortcomings of submarine mining. In the case of Palau, submarine mining is not supported. In the case of Nauru, submarine mining is supported, but with appropriate techniques that should be addressed at formal international negotiations. I personally agree with Nauru's president stance, as regular land mining, which is common in countries such as Venezuela, Brazil, or Guyana, needs a legal framework that will entail reasonable exploitation of these resources with minimal damage to the environment and ensuring appropriate working conditions for miners. Another United States ship just crossed the Panama Canal, further suggesting that the United States is up to something in the Southern Caribbean. However, we are still waiting for them to fight. We are waiting for them to fire a missile or a drone or to deploy amphibious troops into Venezuela, but none of that is happening yet. And Venezuelan military and militias, of course, are getting prepared. Recruitment has been a success. A lot of people wish to fight for the country, but we're still very favorable to Richard Grenell's talks to Maduro, and also we should expect that many of the countries that were addressed by Venezuelan Foreign Minister Ivan Gil at the United Nations General Assembly, dozens of countries, I read the list a while ago, they should perhaps develop the Salvation Army for Palestine, which will most likely support Venezuela as well. Donald Trump met with Erdogan from Turkey in Washington, D.C., but it does not seem clear what could happen, as Turkey is a country that is always in between United States, Russia, and the Arab world. Although Turkey is strongly against Israel. The problem with Donald Trump is that it's almost impossible to be his ally, because look at what happened to Qatar. If Turkey makes deals with the United States, just as Qatar did in the past, Turkey could be betrayed at any time. And the Ukraine war is the perfect example. The United States was supporting Ukraine during the Biden presidency, then Donald Trump supported Putin at the beginning of his term, and now he's abruptly trying to support Ukraine again when the Ukraine war is almost lost. This timing of United States summit at the Pentagon might be just a show from Pete Hegseth, who comes from Fox News. Many people say he doesn't have the military qualifications required to lead one of the most powerful armies in the planet. And perhaps I am speaking biased as a Venezuelan who is used to United States speaking too much and doing nothing, especially during the last 6 weeks of superb deployment only to kill civilians on speedboats. Everything looks fake. Everything looks last minute. No organization exists. And the most prudent advice should be to wait China and Russia's participations in the United Nations General Assembly, which will probably happen later today or tomorrow. Iran already spoke at the General Assembly of the United Nations. They spoke about they want peace, but they still have the right to develop nuclear bombs. The problem with nuclear bombs is that they seem to be a requisite for becoming a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, because when the United Nations Security Council was founded in 1945, the 5 nuclear powers went in with veto power. United States, Soviet Union, France, United Kingdom, and China. Now we have other nuclear powers: Iran, Pakistan, India, Israel. Saudi Arabia will be another nuclear power soon. North Korea already is, of course. Belarus is believed to be a nuclear power as well. And even Venezuela is toying with the possibility of becoming a nuclear power. And perhaps that is one of the reasons why the United States wishes to invade us. However, if the United States invades either Venezuela or Russia, this would be Third World War, because we are too involved in defending our sovereignties, even at the expense of lots of casualties. However, we are not clear on how many casualties does the United States want to endure, because it is very easy for Donald Trump, Marco Rubio, or Pete Hegseth to send people overseas into foreign wars that United States of America's population don't want. Of course, Americans don't want foreign wars because they don't want to receive body bags with their soldiers, which is probably what will happen very soon should a major invasion occur at any time. None of the wars the United States is fighting is for national security of the United States. The United States is sufficiently secure. The United States is secure because it holds the US dollar, which is still the global reserve currency, although that may change. Support for Israel at the top level contrasts with majority of the United States population supporting Palestine. There are too many contradictions in the United States, including the Congress. We have, for example, the crazy Cubans, María Elvira Salazar, Mario Diaz-Balart, and Carlos Jimenez, who are not doing well in Miami polls. The citizens of South Florida are not happy with the deportations and ICE militarization of Miami and the rest of the United States in general. And it seems that Democratic challengers could flip Congress seats. So María Elvira Salazar, Carlos Jimenez, and Mario Diaz-Balart, the crazy Cubans, need the Venezuelan frozen money for their own re-election campaigns, and that is why they are trying to submit to United States Congress a law for sanctioning Venezuelan money, just as it has already happened with Russian assets. Even the price of petroleum is so ridiculous. The price of petroleum rises whenever there are sanction threats against Russia, whenever the United States convinces third countries not to buy oil from Russia, which means that if Russia could trade its oil normally, or if Venezuela, by that matter, or Iran could also trade our oil freely, the price of petroleum would be lower. But there is a necessity of Donald Trump to keep the price of petroleum artificially high so that United States shale oil deposits can be exploited at a profit. Because if Venezuela, Iran, and Russia come back into the market in perfect market competition conditions, equilibrium price would go down and equilibrium quantity would go up. And that is not of the interest of United States government or some of the petroleum majors. The lands of freedom and democracy that are the United States and Europe are no longer practicing perfect competition, and all they do is to promote imperfect competition that seems capitalistic perfect competition, but all it does is to provide further accumulation of capital for there makes it more difficult to get by. Elites, while the rest of the world, every day, and of course, so many wars that are being fought for democracy in Gaza, democracy in Russia, democracy in Iran, democracy in Libya, democracy in Iraq, democracy in Venezuela, when the old democracies are just resorting to wars and sanctions to obstruct competition. No wonder people in many countries around the world are increasingly preferring sovereignty over democracy.